Howdy. I'm not gonna say howdy. This is Jessie Quinn from Cup of Books, and you're watching my monthly minis. I'm going to start doing monthly mini reviews at the end of each month, meaning I will post a video, such as this one, in which I review a bunch of the books I read over the past month that I felt didn't really need their own videos. As always, you can find links to the books mentioned in this video in the underworld below. I recommend checking it out. Let's get started. The first book I read in January was The Secret of the Old Clock by Carolyne Keene. This book is the first book in the Nancy Drew series, and this particular edition is the 80th anniversary limited edition published by Grosset and Dunlap, which I believe is a publishing group from Penguin. A hair-raising car chase, a missing will, a clock with a hidden secret. These are the thrills and chills that have drawn readers to the Nancy Drew mystery stories for 80 years. The writing in this one is very simplistic, almost painfully so, and at times it's very dated. I would have preferred to see more characters that stood out. Overall, Nancy Drew was the only one that really made an impression on me. There's one scene I really like in particular with Nancy in which she gets herself in a sticky situation and sort of gets trapped by the bad guys of the story. She's left to her own devices and she manages to figure out a way out. Another character arrives on the scene and eventually the two of them help her out together. However, the novel makes it really clear that she could have gone out on her own. As an adult reading this, I couldn't help but notice that there are points where the author tries to tone down Nancy Drew's character. The author overemphasized Nancy Drew's interest in shopping and going to dances. Maybe the book was trying to subvert gender expectations and say that Nancy could be really feminine while being really kick-ass. It didn't really feel like that. That being said, in terms of female protagonists, you could do a lot worse than Nancy Drew. Overall, I gave this book 4 stars out of 5 on my Goodreads, though I did admit that last star was given because I liked the cover and because the series holds a lot of nostalgia for me. I read a short story on my Kindle called The Witch Sea by Sarah Diemer. It's available for free off of Amazon, and I highly recommend checking it out. I knew what she was. When she came up the path, feet quiet, deliberate, I knew it from the way she moved. The webbing between her bare toes, how she faltered when she reached the lighthouse landing, like she had never seen things like stairs before. I knew, and I said nothing, because we were all, in our own way, monsters. Sarah Diemer is a fantastic author who writes fantasy stories featuring lesbian romances. The Witch Sea is a short story about a witch named Mariel who has been burdened with the task of making sure a curse that her grandmother put on a vengeful sea god remains intact. One day, a woman who used to be a seal called Nor arrives, and Nor really makes Mariel question why she continues to uphold the curse, a curse that she didn't even create. This one is very bittersweet. In some of Sarah Diemer's other stories, her prose can get a little purpley. However, in this one, I felt like the way she wrote really invoked a sense of loneliness and really made me understand what the main character Mariel was feeling. I really liked the mythology of the gods and the backstory given to Mariel's family and how her grandmother was involved in creating this curse. I felt like it really added depth to such a short story. I highly recommend this one. It's a very short read, and as I already mentioned, it's free off Amazon, so if you're interested in checking out Sarah Diemer's work, this might be a good place to start. I gave The Sea Witch 5 out of 5 stars on Goodreads, and it earned every one of them. The next book I read in January was Beauty by Robin McKinley. It is a young adult fairy tale retelling of The Beauty and the Beast myth. When I started reading Beauty, it didn't immediately grab me. I kept reading a few pages and then putting it down and then picking it back up, reading a few pages and then putting it down. McKinley writes very detailed descriptions, and I think in the beginning that's what kept me from getting very invested in the novel. However, once I got to the middle of the book, I could not put it down. One of my favorite things about this retelling is I really like the way McKinley writes the relationships between all the characters. In particular, I liked the relationship between Beauty and the Beast. I felt like McKinley really emphasized that they were friends first. I also liked the relationships between Beauty and her two sisters, Hope and Grace. While Hope and Grace aren't that memorable of characters, and admittedly I kept getting them confused throughout the novel, I will say that the relationship they had with Beauty, which was very loving and supportive, was memorable, and I really liked that. The way McKinley wrote the relationships between the sisters made the story stronger. And it also helped the reader understand just how much Beauty was giving up to go and live with the Beast in place of her father. There should be more healthy, good relationships between women in fairy tale retellings. I gave Beauty 4 out of 5 stars on my Goodreads. While it had some trouble with the pacing and McKinley's writing was a little difficult to get through in the beginning, it did pick itself up. The other book I picked up from the library was Sun and Moon, Ice and Snow by Jessica Day George. This is a young adult's fairy tale retelling of the Norse fairy tale East of Sun, West of Moon. I was really excited to read this one because its source material is a lesser known tale and it's not nearly as embedded in popular culture as, say, Beauty and the Beast or Snow White. Let me stress that I didn't think this book was terrible. I felt it was a fairly decent young adult's fairy tale retelling. When I read the first chapter or two, I really loved this book. I liked the idea of having a main character who didn't have a name and was just referred to as the lass. I thought that was really clever. I did appreciate the complexity and the way the story is very layered in this novel. I just felt like there wasn't enough depth to the layering. Maybe it's because I felt this novel could have done so much more with the source material and really dug in to some of the uncomfortable parts of the fairy tale, which there are uncomfortable parts. Cough, the nightly visitor, cough. The romance subplot felt very underdeveloped. This novel threw a lot of fantasy creatures that are from different mythologies together, which is a pet peeve of mine. It's explained in the novel that the reason all these fantasy creatures are together is because they're from other countries. And it's not that that was a poor reason for it, it just felt very haphazardly thrown together. Other people may disagree, but when I finished this book, I just sort of felt it was average. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't really anything noteworthy. I gave Sun and Moon, Ice and Snow 3 out of 4 stars on Goodreads. I mentioned I would be participating in my friend Molly's Book Zest Day, in which I pledged to spend the entire day reading. I was able to finish Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen. No one who had ever seen Catherine Morland in her infancy would have supposed her born to be a heroine. Her situation in life, the character of her father and mother, her own person and disposition were all equally against her. In Northanger Abbey, Catherine Morland is our protagonist, and she is obsessed with Gothic literature. One might say she's a bit of a fangirl. While visiting the town of Bath, she ends up being invited to her friend's family's estate. Unfortunately, Catherine's read one too many Gothic novels, and her mind just starts running away with her once she arrives at Northanger Abbey. At the same time, she forms a romantic attachment to Mr. Henry Tilney. This novel can only be described as delightful. I was worried when I first picked this one up that I wouldn't enjoy it as much as I enjoyed some of Austen's other works, simply because I haven't read a lot of Gothic literature. However, Austen's writing style is so humorous and so witty that I couldn't help but laugh out loud, even though I may not have been catching all the little nudges to the Gothic genre. The characters in this one are not nearly as developed as in, say, Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. However, they were enjoyable. I did like spending time with them. I also really loved the narrator, who had such a unique voice and was very part of the story. This one's a little bit lighter than Austen's other works, so if you're interested in trying to read Jane Austen, this might be a good one to start. However, if you dislike Jane Austen, this one probably won't sway you. I really recommend this one. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars on my Goodreads. Also, during my Book Zest Day, I read Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye in its entirety. It took me only a few hours to get through. It's a fairly short novel. The Bluest Eye is Toni Morrison's first novel. It is the story of Pecolia, a black 11-year-old girl living in the 40s who wishes her eyes would turn blue because blue-eyed, blonde-haired children in America are considered beautiful. Among many other themes, Toni Morrison looks into white privilege, beauty standards between women of color and white women, and then it also explores sexual assault and child abuse. I like the way the writing was very beautiful and lyrical while describing very raw and painful and angry subjects. This one is told from a lot of different perspectives. It explores a lot of different characters. However, I really liked how Morrison wrote the kids in this book. I feel like anytime the story was being told from the perspective of the kids, it actually felt like it was being told by kids. I recommend it, but I also recommend it with the warning that there is some potentially triggering content in here. But at the same time, I don't want to discourage you from reading it just because it deals with some pretty heavy, traumatic stuff. I gave Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye 5 out of 5 stars on my Goodreads, and I highly recommend it. The other two books I read in January are Sappho's Fables, Volume 1 by Laura Bishop and Jennifer Diemer, and The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian by Sherman Alexie. I will be reviewing both of those in their own individual videos. Happy reading!